Today, I have the great honor and pleasure to receive Dr. Gail F. Melson. Dr. Melson is Professor Emerita in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at Purdue University. Dr. Melson is a noted authority on children's development and relationship, and also a leader in the field of human-animal interaction. Dr. Melson's research focuses on children's relationship with animals, nature, and emerging technologies. She has been a visiting professor at Radcliffe College, Tufts University, and also the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Dr. Melson has delivered keynote or plenary addresses at conferences throughout the United States, as well as in Japan, Israel, Spain, and Switzerland. She wrote many books and published many articles, and her best-known book is the groundbreaking Why the Wild Things Are: Animals in the Lives of Children, published in 2001. Dr. Melson also blogs for Psychology Today. So now let's listen to what Dr. Melson had to say. Hi, Dr. Melson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
And it's an honor for me to interview you, see, because you are a very accomplished and great, and also a great scholar. Let's start with a very simple question. When began your interest, if not your love of animals?
Well, my interest in animals really began in a professional way quite some time ago, in I would say more than 30 years ago, when I was interested in some of the social world of children. I'm a developmental psychologist, and I focus on social and emotional development. And my training did not include any information about how children relate to animals or the natural world. It was ignored.
Yeah, and I think it was ignored by most scholars.
Ignored. And
kind of terra incognita, you know, we don't look at.
Exactly. Right. And I became interested in the question. Actually, a colleague said to me, I was studying at the time the development of nurturance, and this idea that during childhood, children would learn about, become motivated to care for others, not only caregiving, but to foster the development of others. And as I was studying it, I was studying how children were responding to babies, how children were responding even to the elderly. And a colleague of mine said, well, of course, you know, animals are in so many homes with children, and they need to be cared for. And that must be a place where you could study this development of nurturance. And I said, very good idea. This was before the internet, and I actually had to go to a library. And I said, I am going to go to the library, and I am going to study the literature, the research, the studies on this subject. So I will have background to address this question. And I went to the library, I remember that day, because I could find nothing. I could find zero.
Yeah.
No studies, no research, almost nothing. And this made me very interested in the subject because I said, how is it that people are ignoring this? And the first question I asked, because at Purdue University, we have a very well-respected veterinary school. And I went to the veterinary school and I said, tell me, do you have any statistics how many children growing up in the United States have an animal living with them, maybe more than one. And there were some statistics psychologists didn't even know about. And it was a very big number. These were estimates.
Yeah.
It looked like not just millions, but the majority of children. And this made me really feel that we are ignoring something very important in the family, in the household of children as they are growing up. Mm-hmm. And it made me move away from just thinking about nurturance to thinking about the question in a very broad way, because they are growing up with animals, and how is this affecting child development in many ways, maybe.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning.
That's how you develop what you called in your book, Why the Wild Things Are, Animals in the Lives of Children, published in 2001, what you call the biocentric approach to child development.
Yes.
And that was revolutionary.
Yes. And this came out of just the experience I have described, yeah. Because I realized that there must be a bias in psychology and maybe social science to mean that we are ignoring a very, maybe very important relationship in the family, in the neighborhood, in the lives of children. How is it that we have no attention to this subject?
Yeah.
And so I came up with this idea that social science, including psychology, including child development, was very focused on the influence of other human beings. And it was ignoring not only other animals, because of course humans are animals, but other animals, but it was also ignoring the entire natural world. Mm-hmm. And of course now we have studies of how children and adults are influenced by nature, by forest, by plants. Yeah. We have horticulture therapy. Yeah. So we have really developed this whole idea now, and it's wonderful. And I think now we are much more, I would say, not only social science, but the public. We are much more aware of.
You are vindicated.
Yes, much more aware. And I think things like climate change, mm-hmm. and global warming and these big issues, yeah. maybe are affecting this shift, this change, yeah. Because we see that the natural world is a very, very big influence on us all through development.
Yeah. So can you give us an example of that influence, let's say, on the cognitive, social, emotional, and moral development of children? So can you give us, just an example so everyone understands clearly?
Right.
Well, the cognitive, for example.
Right. Well, one of the things that is very interesting in terms of cognitive development is one of the great thinkers of cognitive development, of course, is Jean Piaget, the Swiss. He was actually a biologist, and he influenced our understanding of cognitive development tremendously. And he had a theory that we now know has a lot of evidence that children develop concepts when they encounter something that is new, but not so new that they cannot absorb the idea. Mm-hmm. So an example I use is a small child learning language has learned the word kitty because there's a cat in the family, and the child has learned that word, one of the first words. And mother and father take the child to the park, and there is a squirrel in the park, and the child sees the squirrel for the first time and says, kitty, kitty, because it has some similarity to a kitty. And maybe the parents say something like, no, not a kitty, it's called a squirrel. Can you say squirrel? And after a little bit, the child begins to see the difference. So there's some similarity, but there's also a difference. And now the child is learning a new word. And so animals present many opportunities to see similarity and difference. They behave somewhat like humans, but they also behave differently.
Yeah, right.
They make sound. So they are, in a way, a great natural learning opportunity.
Right.
Not only the words for animals, but also different behaviors.
Yeah, social, emotional, but let's see the emotional influence of animals on the development of a child. Can you
Right. Well, we have now, studies that have in the last 30, 40 years have grown. And one of the things we see is that animals who are living in the house with children, growing up with children, provide an opportunity for emotional support, a feeling that there is a living being that does not judge you, that is available, that is going to be there for you. And we know social support is extremely important for mental health when it is human social support. We have hundreds of studies of how important human social support is emotionally and physically. In fact, one of the best protections against heart disease is emotional support from other people. So, all through adulthood. So we know how important it is. What we're just now discovering is, can animals provide some of this emotional support? And the answer is yes. It's an opportunity. And one of the things I emphasize in my writing and teaching is what I call a systems approach. And the idea here is that a child's relationship with an animal is never in isolation. It's part of a family system. And there are other human beings there. And of course, if we look at animal-assisted therapy, we have a human therapist or a human educator. And so what we need to do is to think about animals as opportunities that can be facilitated by other humans. It's not automatic. It's not a panacea. And in fact, we know from literature on animal abuse that the animal in the house can be a way to teach cruelty.
Yeah, it's not always positive.
A very good teaching opportunity for cruelty.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by opportunity.
Yeah. And what struck me in your book is that the relationship between a child and a pet or his pet is strikingly similar between boys and girls and children and teenagers.
Yes.
The gender divide, at least when they are young, disappear between boys and girls as far as I think as nurturance is concerned and confiding, which is very interesting.
Exactly.
And it is true, yeah.
Yes, I mean this is really a research result that originally made me go to that library because I was interested in, as I said, the development of nurturance caregiving, caring for others.
Mhm.
It's a very important adult role. You may be a parent, you may be taking care of an elderly person, you may be a teacher. It's a very important adult role, and we have to ask what prepares children for that,
Yeah.
and what happens in childhood that could influence that. So that was my big question as a psychologist. And I began a series of studies with my colleague, Alan Fogel, who is now at University of Utah. And we found strong gender differences early in life, by age 5.
Yeah.
And this was a concern that we would interview small children and they would say, oh, taking care of a baby is a mommy thing. I'm a boy. I'm not interested in that. And it seemed to us that we need everyone to be preparing to be nurturers,
Yes.
not just females, everyone. And so that raised our question: what are the opportunities for boys?
Mhm.
We don't give them dolls to practice taking care of. Most people don't. They're not doing so much babysitting when they are teenagers or young adults.
Yeah.
So what could help a boy learn about, be motivated about nurturance? And so we began. This is when our colleague mentioned pets at that moment, and we discovered no research. So we began to research that question, and we found that when it was an animal, there was no gender difference. Nobody said, oh, taking care of a puppy is a mommy thing. No. It's boys, girls. We call it gender neutral.
Yeah.
So this was a big result, I think, for us, because we felt it was very encouraging. We felt here is an opportunity again for boys, because so many have animals, to learn about caring for something that will die without your care, really.
Yeah.
I mean, and learning about their needs.
Yeah.
Their needs are not the same as your needs.
Yeah.
If you give them, your chocolate cake, they could get sick. That's not, maybe you love it, but not good for them.
Yeah.
It could be an opportunity for perspective taking, the
Yeah.
idea of a different perspective, of a different mind.
Yeah, and talking about the theory of the mind, how can interacting for a boy or a girl with an animal can help them, master, if I may say so, the theory of the mind, which is crucial to the social skill, anticipating how someone is going to think. Does it have an effect? Can it enhance the theory of the mind in a child?
Yeah, I think, again, it's an opportunity. One of the things we see is that from a very young age, when children encounter animals, and it could be outside the family, it could be in a school, it could be in a park, when they encounter animals, they encounter them as what we call other subjectivities, not an object, but another living, thinking, feeling being.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, innate. I think this is evolved in the human species. This is not, we don't teach children, this is what you should do.
No.
They do it naturally. So that's the first thing. They are encountering another being, another mind, another set of emotions, another intentions, another way of behaving that then challenges them because it's different from yourself, right? it challenges them to understand, what does this creature think? What does this creature want? What does this creature intend? And so all of this can help to contribute to theory of mind.
Yeah.
Now, I think we do not have, at this time, very strong research evidence that we could say, for example, children who have pets in their home have a more advanced theory of mind. No, because I think it's more complex. But they have an...
Can contribute.
Yes, it can contribute, exactly.
Okay. Children undergoing psychotherapy or having psychological issues, you mentioned that the presence of animals can provide a holding environment, using the expression coined by Donald Winnicott.
Winnicott, right.
Enough parenting. Can you give us example on how animals for children who have psychological problems can provide a holding environment and a good enough parenting? Can you give us example of both?
Right. Well, one example which I learned about at Green Chimneys, and I think it was a very powerful example for me. I was speaking to one of the therapists, and she was treating a child who had suffered very severe abuse, physical and sexual abuse, and was living at Green Chimneys for treatment. And this little girl could not tolerate any human being touching her. And so in the therapy session, this therapist had a guinea pig. And she put the guinea pig on the chest of the child, just resting here. As she was able to speak with her, of course not touching, but able to speak with her, able to do the therapy. And this touch of the guinea pig, which of course is very soft fur, it's small, it's moving, this child could use this animal as what I would say Winnicott would call a holding environment to allow the child to begin to relate to the therapist. So it was a bridge to the therapist. And actually, this therapist said after many months, the child could be in the therapy session without
the guinea pig
on the chest, was able to tolerate not touching a human, but to tolerate the therapy session. So that's I think one example. In terms of good enough parenting, that's idea of Donald Winnicott. Again, at Green Chimneys, many children were removed from their families for terrible family situations of abuse and neglect. And part of the therapeutic environment was to give them models of parenting that was, Winnicott would say, good enough. It's not abusive. Is it perfect? No, not abusive. So there were many examples in the farm, in the animals. You could visit, you could watch.
Good enough parenting.
Exactly. You could watch, a calf with a cow. You could watch a piglet with a large sow, a large female pig. You could see this kind of good enough parenting. Now, one of the important things at Green Chimneys, and I think other therapeutic environments, was they did not believe it was enough for the child to observe this, that it was important that there was a human therapist there to facilitate what lesson are we learning? What are we seeing? Again, we see the system.
Yeah.
Right.
One point you made in an interview, I think, is that pet support doesn't change according to different culture. It seems to remain in different cultures, which I think very interesting. It seems to be something almost universal. Am I right?
Yes, of course, some things do change from one culture to another. In some cultures, dogs are very beloved pets. In other cultures, they are a food product, and some people are eating them. So, of course, there are many cultural differences, but in general, we see what we call pet keeping, that is, having pets and children growing up with them. We see this in many, many, many different cultures, and many of the same feelings and relationships we see across many cultures. There is a theory, I think it's only a theory, which comes from the idea of biophilia, that humans, all humans, have evolved over many centuries with other animals. Of course, that's true. And so we have a preference and attention to other living things.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean we are always kind and loving. We may be hunting them for food. Maybe treating them badly, but we are paying attention.
Yeah, there is a relationship, whatever the relationship is,
Yes.
And you mentioned something very important about what was going on in Green Chimneys, at Green Chimneys, and it leads to my next question. It's sure you wrote in your blog in Psychology Today, that having an animal with a person or a child is not enough to make that child feel better. There's a long discussion with Hal Herzog.
Right.
The topic, he said, well, okay, you put a dog and an animal, okay, something is going to happen. But I said, it's only the beginning. My work was, what am I going to do with what is developing between the animal and the person? My life would have been easier if I had drank a cup of coffee, read the book, and wait and say, okay, 45 minutes, let's pick up the dog and we leave. But that's not what animal-assisted intervention is.
Absolutely.
And a kid who was in the process of being diagnosed with autism, I didn't know it, but I knew that there was something a little strange because he was moving all the time, literally all the time. And he was supposed to read to the animal.
Oh.
And again, you see, only the dog and the child, it wouldn't have happened. You needed the person. And in that case, the person was me. And in the case of that child who claimed that he was afraid of the dog, but at the same time, he was very attracted to the dog. He wanted to take care of it. He wanted to give treats and everything. So I had this flash and I said, the dog is thirsty. He needs more water in his bowl.
Oh,
and I was the official interpreter of what the dog was saying. So I asked him, would you want to give more water to the dog? He said, yes. So he picked up the bowl. There was still a little water in it. And he walked slowly. He didn't want to spill the water. He walked toward the door. And for my good fortune, the restroom was just beside my room, just beside. So I opened the door for him. He pushed the other door because the bathroom, you just had to to push the door. Then he filled the bowl. So I was waiting in my room. And then he asked every time, he would say in French, ouvre la porte, open the door.
Right.
So I would say, yeah, I'm coming. And then I would take a long time, one step after the other. But what was my strategy, was to show him that he could stand still for a minute. He could do it, autistic or not. You because and he never spilled the water, never. So
Yeah.
finally, I would open the door, and then you would walk slowly and put just, how do you measure it? Esther did that. Maybe Gail Melson would have done something different with that young autistic boy, and maybe it would have been better. Maybe it would have been less good.
And I think it's what is more helpful is to think about a bigger question. How do we measure the effectiveness of therapy? Yeah. With or without? Just that simple question. That's a very big question, and we don't have an answer for that. A lot has to do, again, I come back to the idea of system. A lot has to do with the connection, the match between the client or the patient and the therapist. And it's very difficult to make generalizations about what is the most effective therapy. Now we add an animal. We're adding, of course, it's a living, thinking being, but I'm going to use the word tool. I don't mean that.
No, but yeah, that's what it is.
But if you are a therapist, for example, treating a child, you may use the tool of play therapy. You will have a dollhouse. You will have little figures of family, and you will play with the child and try to understand the family problems in the play.
Yeah.
So that's one method. Now, another method maybe is there is an animal in this therapy session.
Yeah.
Again, it is, what are you now going to do? And it will depend on the child, and it will depend on the therapist, and it will depend on the animal. And maybe this animal is not a good choice for this child.
Yeah.
Maybe it should be the guinea pig and not the dog. So it is such a complex system that I think it's frustrating for people who are involved in animal-assisted therapy that we cannot provide rules. We cannot provide, if you do this, this will happen. If you do that, this is the animal you should choose for this.
I want to thank you very much. It was an excellent interview.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed speaking with you.
You've been very generous and extremely interesting. So,
well, I wish you great success with this project.
Thank you very much.